You're listening to Don't Waste Water.
I don't think there is anyone left in the world saying that we are on track to achieve SDG 6. Let's forget about providing 20 litre, 50 litre to everyone every day, but let's ensure we provide 1.5 litre per day that is of guaranteed quality.
Hello, bonjour, and welcome to the Don't Waste Water podcast.
For the WHO, you have this idea that water should not represent more than 3 to 5% of the monthly budget of a household. So we force ourselves to be below the threshold of 3% so that there is a margin to pay for other domestic needs.
I'm your host, Antoine Walter, and in today's episode, I'm delighted to welcome Amandine Muret as my guest.
Sometimes we forget to listen to people's expectations. It's not only about making a good project that, okay, it's safely managed, it's safe, it's accessible, etc. What do people want? What are they ready to pay for and why? And convenience is key.
Amandine is Chief Development Officer at 1001 Fontaines.
Out of all the kiosks we started since 2005, 85% are running today. We are not reinvesting because it's not working. We are reinvesting to ensure it's going to continue to work. 8 years ago, a kiosk was maybe selling 60, 70 bottles per day on average. Today, it's closer to 100, 110 on average. And our plan is to continue growing these sales, so to ensure that we maximize the potential of each and single infrastructure that we've set up in the past 20 years.
1001 Fontaines is a French NGO that pioneered an innovative model, leveraging philanthropy and social entrepreneurship to create a sustainable impact.
It's complementary to pipe network. It's not a competition. We all want pipe networks to reach every home. Will it happen? I don't know. But what I know is that in any case, it will take time. Bottling facility can be done tomorrow.
And before we start, let me thank my sponsors, Simple Lab and Bluefoot Membranes. The legend attributes this famous sentence to Albert Einstein: insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But regardless of whom really said that, let's acknowledge that in water endeavors, there are quite some instances where we're not applying that wisdom, starting with water development. Think of it, while the wealthiest countries in the world marry infrastructure debt with repeated underinvestment, proving more and more that the centralized water infrastructure will need to evolve, we for long still pushed that same model in water development projects, leading to short or at best midterm failures, but in all cases wasted time and investment. Now I say for long because I would believe that the picture is evolving with more and more entrepreneurial approaches applied to water development. The most loyal listeners may recall my conversation with Sean Davis on how to blend philanthropic money with different investment streams to maximize the impact of that money. But you'll of course hear me name dropping more than once today another guest of this podcast, Gary White, who democratized this concept of a for-profit philanthropy which hence grows its capital while it performs its impact. Those approaches are not only pragmatic, efficient, and impactful, they are also timely. If you followed the EAVAX findings published end of last year, 4.4 billion people lack access to safely managed drinking water in the world, which is twice the former and I would say official estimate. All the while an already underfunded water development sector saw some spectacular cuts with, for instance, USAID reducing its water financing by nearly 90%. So more than ever, you want your water development approaches to be as capital efficient as possible and, quite frankly, entrepreneurial in the approach, which may involve breaking some taboos. Let me throw some into the conversation. What if bottled water was part of the solution? What if we decoupled the water we drink and the water we use? What if we accepted that everyone's ideal of a full piped network coverage is delusional? And what if we came back to the very definition of the goal outlined in SDG 6 and forcing the supply of safe and affordable water, and I insist on both safe and affordable? How, you may ask? Well, I'll let Amandine explain and I'll leave her the floor for a dense, packed and passionate conversation I wanted to share with you on this very World Water Day. So let me remind you that if you like what you hear, please take this episode and share it with a colleague, a friend, your boss or your team, and I'll meet you on the other side. And yes, technically speaking, this is maybe not my best setup ever to record an intro, but I hope you liked it. Hi, Amandine. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Antoine. Nice to meet you.
Actually, we are preparing that special episode for World Water Day. And World Water Day is always an ambiguous time of the year because on one end, it's the day where we bring awareness on water. On the other end, it's a sign, as it's still existing, that maybe there are some challenges which we haven't solved yet. Water was the key thing on the agenda of the Mar del Plata conference in the 70s, and it was supposed to be solved in a decade. Unfortunately, it wasn't solved in terms of access to water, in terms of treating the water. It was again the priority of the Water Action Decade in the 80s, and then in the 90s, wasn't solved. Then Millennium Development Goals number 7 was about water. We entered the Millennium Development Goal period with 1.8 billion people without access to water, and we ended it with 1.8 billion people without access to water. Then SDG 6 came around, and without predicting the future, we're not on track to achieving SDG 6 by 2030, so most probably there's going to be something else after 2030. But if we take one step back and try to look at those challenges, what is it that doesn't click with the way we try to solve it today? And what are the main challenges which we would have to overcome?
I guess it's a disappointing situation for everyone. And I don't think there is anyone left in the world saying that we are on track to achieve SDG 6. I think one of the things we need to keep in mind is that we also get what we measure. And if you look at the way the Millennium Development Goals were set, it was not focused on quality. It was really about improved water. Already with the SDGs, as Fontaines, we were quite happy to see that at least people were starting talking about safe drinking water and putting the question of quality as one of the criteria. And that's why also the problem is not decreasing, is because we are actually getting more conscious that safe water is a huge challenge because you need to first get access to it full time, and to get quality the moment you actually use it. And especially when you drink it, you need full quality with WHO standards. And I think what we have collectively failed to acknowledge is the complexity of combining all these factors and bringing it to everyone in the world. If you look especially in rural areas where you still have major challenges, this is where the question of coverage, continuity, and quality are actually extremely hard to solve. And it comes at a very high cost per capita. And we don't manage to make it work. And also because what we've seen is that many projects are actually focused on infrastructure. Do you set up centralized systems, very often pipe networks, because obviously this is what everybody wants. One household, one tap, 24/7 running water, WHO standard quality. But the reality is that it's not happening. It's progressing very slowly in terms of coverage. And what we have been observing in the field is that it comes once again with questions of quality because you need to maintain these networks over time. And the management systems are also not integrated in the project design. It's all about extending coverage. But once it's done, how do you actually maintain these systems? How do you control? How do you monitor that the quality is delivered? Is even more complex than setting up this already resource-intensive infrastructure. And it's not always integrated in the design of the project.
Which is also very ironic because we are pushing to water development the same concepts that we have built in the 19th century in the Western world, which is also a concept which is decaying nowadays. So we have signs in the developed world of lacking the ability to manage the quality of those networks. Right. And yet we push them as water development, which sounds like repeating a mistake without trying to learn from it. What I'm interested in is what is your differentiated take and a differentiated solution at that with 1001 Fontaines?
1001 Fontaines is a 20-year-old organization. We were created by 3 co-founders. One of them was Cambodian and grew up in a Cambodian village and actually faced during his whole childhood the question of accessing safe water because at that time, pipe networks were only covering 1% of rural areas in Cambodia. So there was not even the question of, is it a continuous service? Is it a top quality service? It was simply not existing. He got the opportunity to study in France and he met with our 2 other co-founders who were having more a business background. And I thought that, okay, this is a challenge we want to solve, but we want to bring maybe a business mindset to that. So the first thing they did is going to meet with utilities because they also thought that the best approach was pipe networks. So they met with utilities, they understood the economics, and it was just not matching with a rural context with low density. So they also looked at urban areas And they saw that, okay, actually people differentiate two things, domestic water on one side and drinking water on the other. And when it comes to drinking water, people tend to have different usage. They look for other solutions complementary to pipe networks. And this is how most people manage their water. So they thought that if it's happening like that in urban areas, why not replicating that in rural areas? And they thought that what actually matters is to work on health, and for that reason, to focus on quality for drinking water only. So let's forget about providing 20 liter, 50 liter to everyone every day, but let's ensure we provide 1.5 liter per day that is of guaranteed quality. And the best way they found, once again, looking also at what was happening in urban areas already, they found that bottled water was one way that could be decentralized in terms of production and could enable us to guarantee quality up to the point of consumption. The main change of mindset is really the focus on water for drinking instead of the complete question of domestic water, and accepting that by providing quality for drinking water, you can really work on health. And this is where quality actually matters.
So it's not bottled water as in Dasani puts a big plant somewhere, or Evian, and then sends bottles and bottles and bottles and bottles. It's a local, small size production of a bottled water to make those 1.5 liters of water available.
Yes, exactly. Actually, because when you look even at the economics of bottled water, once again, we come from a business DNA. So they really looked at the P&L of what it means to produce bottled water. And when you look at the economics, distribution costs are huge in bottled water. So they thought that if we wanted to work, it needs to be affordable because we are an NGO. We are here to make it as a utility to ensure that vulnerable populations can pay for water. So if we want it to work, it needs to be affordable. So we need to reduce distribution costs. And for that, they came up with the idea to decentralize production. So what we do, and actually what we've been doing for 20 years because our co-founders got it right from the beginning, we set up small infrastructure directly in the rural communities that we want to serve. And we ensure that there is a purification system that is able to treat the locally available water. And we also give the delivery vehicles that will enable door-to-door delivery in a 5 to 7 kilometer radius. So this is how we can really tackle these isolated rural areas.
We'll go to the depth of how it works. Before that, you mentioned 20 years ago, so it's not like super recent as an approach. You mentioned P&L, you mentioned a business mindset. When I had that conversation with Gary White on that microphone last year, he explained how the most difficult part in what he's doing is to change the mindset of people when it comes to water development. To look at it now as just a way to burn money in a charitable fashion, but to make it profitable or as profitable as possible to make it also sustainable. I would expect someone starting an NGO in 2025 to have read that and to have seen what Water.org did do and to get inspiration from that. I would not expect someone creating an NGO 20 years ago to be such in advance of phase towards a market which is still struggling to adopt that mindset today. So how difficult was it back then to start with that principle? And would you also say that it's one of the main challenges to get that accepted, that there is an in-between between pure philanthropy and pure business where we try to make the maximum profitability?
At the beginning in 2005, as you said, saying that we are going to sell water already was a message that was not at all heard by the sector. And by the sector, I mean not only institutions, but even NGOs would tell us that we are like capitalists trying to make money out of a vulnerable population. So yes, it happened. I think one of the major milestones again were the SDGs, because if you look at the exact definition is the SDG 6, you have the word affordable.
Affordable water, yeah.
If it's affordable, it means it has a price, right? So this is where it was finally written that yes, if you want safe water, quality has a cost, and as such has a price. This for us was a turning point. And basically what we also proved over the years is that people are ready to pay. So there is a demand for that. And we set our own limits in terms of what we mean by affordability. We know that for the WHO, you have this idea that water should not represent more than 3 to 5% of the monthly budget of a household. And we know that we do only drinking water. So it's only one fraction of the total water needs. So we force ourselves to be below the threshold of 3% so that there is a margin to pay for other domestic needs, for which we know the price is also more affordable because it could be pipe networks, it could be groundwater, etc., whatever solutions populations have in these areas, and it's often cheaper. We know that we can keep some price that remains affordable, and we set that definition for ourselves.
Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to quickly thank my sponsor, Simple Lab. If you're in the water industry and you're running a water quality sampling campaign or tweaking plant process performance, Simple Lab has you covered. You can easily order online from over 275 commercial labs. Simply put, Simple Lab is a one-stop shop for everything from routine testing kits to specialized analyses like PFAS or microplastics. You don't have to juggle multiple labs and complicated logistics anymore. Instead, you get a single, streamlined process for ordering kits and reviewing results. Plus, there's always a real person to talk to, so if you're tired of cobbling together lab documents and quotes and services for each new requirement, or you just want to try a new way for more efficient testing of water samples, check out Simple Lab. They're all about making water quality testing, well, simple. So head to their website, the link is in the description, line up the tests you need, hit order, and let them handle the rest. Thanks Simple Lab for supporting my work. Check them out to support me, and back to me on that very topic. Let me pause here for a second to ask you a question. Have you ever heard of a membrane that refuses to break? It sounds unusual, but it's true. Meet Bluefoot Membranes, a Belgian company that has developed the first and only unbreakable membrane specifically designed for MBR, if you're new here, membrane bioreactor applications. This technology is setting a new standard in wastewater treatment. Water engineers and industry experts have tested this membrane, and no matter how much they pull and twist, the membrane holds strong. Now, it's not just about membranes, it's also about an award-winning and passionate team that doesn't take impossible as an answer. The people at Bluefoot Membranes are driven by a mission to make wastewater reuse the new standard, united by a shared purpose to leave a blue footprint on the world. So yes, they manufacture cool membranes, but they also push the boundaries of what's possible in MBR technologies. To learn more about them, check the link to their website in the description. A big thanks to Bluefoot Membranes for sponsoring this episode, and back to me. On the topic of affordability, there are countries in the world where getting access to water today is already taking much more than those 5%, because we have always this image of people walking distances to get water, and that is a part of the situation. But another part of the situation is that there is an informal economy existing, and that informal economy can be much more expensive than those 3 to 5%. So actually, when you make them pay for that quality water, but in a structured way, in some cases, probably, or correct me, it's going to be cheaper than the existing informal economy.
Yes. And also, informal economy happens when you already have a bit of a market. In the context where we work, very often you also have the basic traditional solution of boiling water. But when you take the cost of boiling water, purchasing, for instance, charcoal to boil 20 liters, because what we do is providing 20-liter bottles, it's actually more expensive to purchase charcoal and boil 20 liters than purchasing our bottle. And this for us is also something that we try to highlight in terms of behavior change generation. When you have a family who has been boiling water for generations and you want them to switch to something totally different, which is receiving a 20-liter bottled water, a reusable one, so having a service of getting this bottle picked up, a new one delivered, it's a huge behavior change. So to generate that, we need to explain also how much they are actually paying, even if they don't see it. And we are not even factoring in the question of health expenses because of waterborne diseases, etc. But you're right, if you take everything into account, people are already paying a lot. But we need to explain that to raise awareness about the question of quality and justify the fact that we are putting a price on our 20-liter bottle that enables us to guarantee quality and continuity of service.
I'm going to quote Gary White last time here, and then I promise you I stop. They have this concept at water.org of the coping cost of water, which they estimate to be at $300 million per year. When achieving SDG 6, I know it's a moving target because we're getting closer to 2030 and we're getting later and later, but at the last time it was calculated is about $116 million per year. So coping costs are higher than what it costs to do it. But if the financial vehicles to turn one into the other don't exist, then you keep digging the hole of the coping cost and you don't solve the lack of financing on the other end. Can we explain how one of your water kiosks works? What do you get as input water? Who's running it? First on the surface level, and then we'll dig into it.
Maybe what I can do is help you picture a bit the context. We're working in rural Cambodia, and rural Cambodia is pretty much the same all over the country. So you have what they call communes, which are basically a set of 5 to 7 villages, and you will have approximately 10,000 inhabitants. So 2,000 households. And what we do is we work with the local authorities. So we build a water kiosk on a public land. So what we mean by a kiosk is a building connected to a locally available water source. It could be groundwater, it could be a pond, it could be a river, or sometimes it could even be pipe networks that are existing in bigger villages. And we take this water, we purify it up to WHO standards for drinking water, and we bottle it into a 20-liter container that is reusable. So this means that we take the responsibility to manage this container, to clean them, fill them, seal them, and then these bottles are delivered to the home of consumers. So consumers would basically pay a one-time deposit for the bottle at the beginning and then pay for a refill. So it means that once they are done with their bottle, they will just get another one, give the empty bottle. This bottle goes back to our kiosk, gets cleaned, refilled, and again in circle.
You say we. It's not, if I get it right, directly 1001 Fontaines, which does the operation of the water kiosk. You are empowering a middleman somewhere.
Yes, actually, there are several layers in our model, and I think it's also one of the strengths of 1001 Fontaines is to leverage every level and ensure local capacity building. So what we do indeed is that we entrust the water kiosk to a person from the community. So we select someone who has the motivation to become a water entrepreneur, who doesn't need actually a lot of skills, basic literacy, reading, writing, counting. And we train this person to become a successful water entrepreneur, which means knowing how to purify water, how to organize the delivery, how to do basic financial management. So following expenses, understanding how much they can pay themselves, how much they can pay their team. But in a kiosk, you typically have 3 people working, one managing the kiosk itself, so cleaning the bottles, refilling them, etc., and 2 people for delivery. So it's really a micro enterprise, but that has for a sole purpose to serve the community with safe water.
I lied. I said I would not name drop Gary White, but I'm just going to come back to the water credit model is that someone will take a micro loan, install something, and actually not really use the water only for themselves, but become kind of a micro entrepreneur as well, and then distribute it to a community, which is probably, given the size of the loans they're giving out, smaller than your typical 10,000 circle you're mentioning here. But the main difference would be that you're saying, okay, instead of leaving it up to someone to really have the entrepreneurial full system to build it from A to Z, you're going to help them out by bringing in methodologies who works, probably technologies who are proven, and then they take it from there and it's the same type of end result. Get that one right?
Yes, but what you have to take into account is that we're talking about people who mostly have never been entrepreneurs before. And if we were not there to offer the opportunity, most of them would probably not have become entrepreneurs. A big point is that they don't invest. We provide everything for free. So as an NGO, we subsidize both the capital investment, so the building, the treatment system, even the delivery vehicles, the first bottles, everything is given for free. We also take care of all the capacity building for free. So this means that anyone who really just has the motivation to do it has no barrier to become an entrepreneur. And afterwards, what we observe is that it's not entrepreneurs that we empower and leave. If we do that, there is no way the services will actually sustain, not in terms of quality, not in terms of continuity. And just because at some point one entrepreneur can decide to do something else, it's not possible for us to just leave. So what we do is that we also have a local partner organization who is in charge not only of developing the network, opening new kiosks, but also of supporting the existing ones. And this is a very strong component of the model because every month, each entrepreneur receives the visit from the local partners team, so which means to share data about sales, to take a sample of water to check quality, affordability, to ensure that there is no need for technical maintenance, to enable entrepreneurs as well to order consumables. Let's say they need to change their filters or they need more bottles because they want to expand their activity. All these services are provided by the local partner organization. And what is interesting is that we have developed a model that is a kind of social franchise. So entrepreneurs pay a percentage of their revenues to that national level organization. And in exchange for that, they get all the services. So this is where you go back to this idea of having a business mindset. What 1001 Fontaines wants is that at some point, you don't need to put philanthropy and everything continues, but not only at the kiosk level, but nationally, this local organization is also totally self-sustaining when it comes to supporting existing kiosks. Opening new ones is subsidized. That's fine. That's because we're targeting vulnerable populations and it's totally normal to have subsidies for that. But what we want is that if we stop, because maybe one day we'll not be able to get all the funds we need, we never know. And in the current world, it's good not to be too dependent on fundraising. We want everything to continue. So we want entrepreneurs to make a living and we want the support services to sustain.
Let me try to put that in my words to see if I get it. That means you are building a flywheel where you are putting the capital upfront of installing the kiosks. And so you are responsible for the future expansion of the model to more places, more water kiosks. But if you were to disappear because for whatever reason, someone comes in and says he's stopping all the ads to countries which are not his own.
Random idea.
A random idea, absolutely. The country itself can at least keep sustaining the existing ones because that one is fully sustainable itself. And maybe even, now I'm fantasizing, they could not at the same rate, but still have additional growth and keep building capacity in the country.
Here is where you're a bit dreaming, definitely.
Maybe.
Because what we've seen as well is that with the years passing, you have the question of maintenance coming. We do regular maintenance, but some kiosks were established back in 2005, in 2008, in 2010. And the beauty of our model is that most of them are still working today. But as you can imagine, a building that was established in 2010, at some point, will need some revamping. And this is where we are not yet at the level of financial sustainability where we can fully reinvest without philanthropy. So before even looking at growth of new kiosks, there is already a work to do on the capital maintenance expenditures. And that's really the next step for us. We cover the operating expenses. We cover the routine maintenance. And what we want in the future is to be able to really cover the reinvestment as well. But for the moment, we are mostly planning to reinvest through philanthropy to be able to ensure that our portfolio of water kiosk is at the standard that we want in terms of well production tools for the entrepreneur.
Let me pause here for a second to ask you a question. Have you ever heard of a membrane that refuses to break? It sounds unusual, but it's true. Meet Bluefoot Membranes, a Belgian company that has developed the first and only unbreakable membrane specifically designed for MBR, if you're new here, membrane bioreactor applications. This technology is setting a new standard in wastewater treatment. Water engineers and industry experts have tested this membrane, and no matter how much they pull and twist, the membrane holds strong. Now, it's not just about membranes, it's also about an award-winning and passionate team that doesn't take impossible as an answer. The people at Bluefoot Membranes are driven by a mission to make wastewater reuse the new standard, united by a shared purpose to leave a blue footprint on the world. So yes, they manufacture cool membranes, but they also push the boundaries of what's possible in MBR technologies. To learn more about them, check the link to their website in the description. A big thanks to Bluefoot Membranes for sponsoring this episode, and back to me.
I'd just like to put what you're saying in context. Your first kiosks were established 20 years ago, roughly, and you have many of them which are over a decade old. If you look at the standard in water development, the traditional way, there are 300,000 abandoned pumps in Africa alone. And I remember when Mr. Beast did his 100 wells video, which made actually the topic world famous. So just for that, it was worth it. I discussed that with Sean Fury, who sent me a TED talk of someone from the Canadian Aid was saying that they were rebuilding a water network. But when they did it, they discovered that someone had built a water network at the exact same place 6 years before, and that was US Aid. So what I want to put things in context is that, yes, it's at some point a challenge to rebuild a kiosk, to maintain a building, revamp an installation, but your timeline is already 2 to 3 times longer than the typical traditional water aid approach. So just that is already beyond amazing.
Thanks for the acknowledgement, but I think what is interesting, to give you a precise figure, out of all the kiosks we started since 2005, 85% are running today. So it's not only about maintaining, reinvesting. We are not reinvesting because it's not working. We are reinvesting to ensure it's going to continue to work. And this is really a major difference, that it has been working all these years and growing over the years, not only in terms of network, but each water kiosk has also progressively increased in footprint. I personally joined 1001 Fontaines 8 years ago. A kiosk at that time was maybe selling 60, 70 bottles per day on average. Today, it's closer to 100, 110 on average. And our plan is to continue growing these sales, so to ensure that we maximize the potential of each and single infrastructure that we've set up in the past 20 years. So it's really a long-term work. And that's why there is a strong value in this national organization, because it's not 1001 Fontaines from France in Paris saying that, oh, the water kiosk number X needs support. It's because we have teams in the field going every month that we know the exact setup of the kiosk across Cambodia.
Water tech nerd question here. Do your kiosks have always the same design, or do you really adapt to any type of source you can be tapping into?
Design has obviously changed over the years, but the basic design is exactly the same, because we understood that standardizing was also the way for us to gain efficiency and be able to expand in a faster way. So we've, for instance, had years when we opened 30, 35 kiosks in one given year. So for that, you need standardization. You can't change the design every month. It's not possible. But what we do basically is that we can add a bit of water treatment steps based on the raw water contamination. So here we have some flexibility. We are not a technology organization. We didn't create a treatment system that is super revolutionary. No, we use the technology available on market and we adapt to the local water contaminants. So this is where we can add steps. For instance, if you have groundwater that is very hard, then you need a bit of a stronger pretreatment. That's okay. We can add these steps. So this is what we can change. And what we've done recently is more work on upgrading the design, because in 20 years, basically, we didn't change that much the way entrepreneurs work. But in 2025, you have ways to structure water production that are not only more efficient, but just more ergonomic for the entrepreneurs. And what we feel is that at some point, it's also our responsibility to ease the work of entrepreneurs, because we are talking about it like it's a nice job. Let us be clear, they are carrying 120-liter bottles every day, 7 days a week for years. It's 2 tons per day. So it's huge. And we felt that at some point, we also need to invest on ergonomics. So for instance, having automatic filling machines, looking at how to ensure that the bottles are always little up in the kiosk so that they don't need to bend to fill the bottle or to carry them. So we invested on that, and it's really appreciated by the entrepreneurs. So as part of the reinvestment plan that I was mentioning before, so not only are we going to reinvest on aging buildings, but we also want to upgrade all our kiosks to ensure that everyone benefits from a more modern design. It's still really standardized in terms of ergonomics, but we want to make it more modern and easier for the entrepreneurs.
You mentioned your 85% of kiosks which are still operating. As we're talking business, let me use business terms. What is your churn rate in terms of entrepreneurs? Are they still all the same, or do you have to retrain new people regularly?
So we have, on average, I'd say approx 5% turnover every year of entrepreneurs. Some years before, it was more. So we think that all the work we've done, not only on ergonomics, but also on helping, giving them more support in terms of sales, etc., has enabled them to get a more stable situation. So they are happier, basically, and they stay longer. But as I said, it's a hard work. And at some point, they leave. We're fine with that. And that's also an important thing, that it's not their kiosk. They're in charge of managing it, but it's not their kiosk. It's the public infrastructure for drinking water. It is established on a land given by the public authorities. The building that we construct is transferred to the local authorities. So it's really the public building. So if an entrepreneur resigns, we find a new one, we train this person, and sometimes we even empower someone who was working with the previous entrepreneur from basically being an assistant operator to becoming entrepreneur. So that's also easier. But once again, it means that we take the accountability for the continuity of service. We being our local partner organization, but it's part of the commitment we take towards the local authorities and in the end, towards the communities that we serve, that we will be there to replace the entrepreneur if this person resigns. We will ensure by then the continuity of service.
So in water, we often have this BOT model, build, operate, transfer. What you're changing is that you're turning the two letters around. It's BTO, build, transfer, and then it's going to be operated, which is also what you would do with an existing, a company coming in Paris and operating the sewer would not rebuild the sewer. It's existing for 150 years or 200 years. So it's the same, except it's a new infrastructure. What you're touching on here is the elephant in the room we haven't addressed yet, which is how do you interface with the local authorities, the commune, as you mentioned, the province, the regions, or even the government?
We work with them at the local level, and this is where you really have a formal agreement between us and the authorities. So because they give the land, they give access to the water source. We transfer back the ownership of the building, as I said just before, and they acknowledge that it's a public infrastructure for drinking water, and they give us the mandate to find the entrepreneur, empower the entrepreneur, and train the person in the long run. So this is really a public partnership at local level, and we work with national ministries to ensure that our work has basically the license to operate. So we sign a memorandum of understandings. For instance, in Cambodia, it's the Ministry of Rural Development that is in charge of rural drinking water supply. So we have an MOU with them. But what is interesting in your question is that it actually just touches one of our bottlenecks, which is that we often navigate in gray areas. Because on one side, basically, when you look at public policy, they are based on what the whole sector has been doing for decades. So what they want is pipe networks. And for that, you have a clear regulatory framework. They know how to license a private operator. They know how to do it with a public agency. They know how to set a tariff. They know how to put coverage recommendations that you should cover 70% of that given area, etc. And on the other side, you have commercial bottled water. Then you're really a for-profit bottled water provider. You register yourself with the Ministry of Commerce or with the Ministry of Industry, and you're there as an individual wanting to make profits, and you choose bottled water as your business. And what we do basically is neither pipe networks nor commercial bottlers. And we don't tick any boxes because we're not for profit. We want to do bottled water services as a utility, but there is no legal framework for that. So even if we're 20 years old, even if we've been doing the same thing for the past 2 decades, we are still in a position of pioneers, innovators, where we need to show the value of what we do and to negotiate a bit case by case with every municipality the fact that it makes sense to have an infrastructure focused on drinking water and leveraging bottled water. And this is something that we don't see only in Cambodia. It's the case everywhere. We're also working in Madagascar, in Bangladesh. We're exploring Nepal, and everywhere we see the same situation. We don't fit into any existing box, and we need to negotiate. We need to justify. At the end, we need to find someone who becomes a champion of our model and say, okay, I'll put you in the case others, and that's going to be okay because I believe in what you're going to do. And step by step, we build credentials and other people accept that we are in this others case and that it's fine because it's worth keeping us working in the area.
So that means that even in Cambodia, where you're around for 2 decades, you don't have a kind of a snowball effect where a commune would see that the neighbor has that, it works great, and they would come to you. You still have to proactively go to check all the boxes and then to make it happen.
As we've been working for 20 years, we have the level of credentials over the country that makes it much easier to convince the next commune, but it's still a one by one, what we call site selection. So for instance, in 2025, we want to open 20 kiosks. So it means we have to find 20 chiefs of commune ready to give us a land, give us access to a water source, and endorse the project towards the communities. So now we also have relationship with the subnational authorities at provincial level, at district level. So we also implement a more collective approach so that, for instance, if we have one chief of district interested, then he can bring 10 chiefs of commune in one shot. We can present the project and maybe get 5 out of it. So it's more efficient because we have the support from all the layers of the Cambodian administration. But principally, there is nothing in the law saying every rural commune should have a bottled water kiosk providing bottled water as a utility. This doesn't exist. They acknowledge in their policy that you have community-based water kiosks, but it's not saying clearly that it's bottled water, and it's not set as something that every commune should have.
So that means that if you were to drop the bottle and to say, bring your own bottle, then you're maybe closer to the traditional approach where it's kind of an open source of water and you can get your water and then maybe pay by the meter. I know it's not your model. I get it brings different type of quality issues and health issues in the end, but that would be the closest existing box within regulation.
Yes. But one thing I would like to say is that, as you said, it brings question of quality, but not only quality. It also brings another question, and that for us is very important, is the question of willingness to pay. Because what we've seen is that people don't only pay for our service because it's safe. They understood that, they're happy with that, obviously, but they also pay because it's delivered to the home. And the convenience, the quality of service and the customer relationship, reliability, etc., actually matters as much as ensuring quality, if not more. So for us, it's not only about making safe water available, it's also about providing it in the way that people are comfortable with. Because coming back to what I said at the beginning about behavior change, I feel sometimes we forget to listen to people's expectations. It's not only about making a good project that, okay, it's safely managed, it's safe, it's accessible, etc. What do people want? What are they ready to pay for and why? And convenience is key. And this means that, for instance, for us, we don't have a monopoly. You could have an informal bottled water provider starting a small business. If this guy delivers to the home and we don't, well, maybe people will go for this service, even if it's not safe, even if it's less affordable, but they'll choose that. So this is what we need to understand is the factors behind willingness to pay, so that we ensure that we are not only safe, etc., we're also answering their needs to ensure that they will choose our service in the long run.
You mentioned customer voice, which again is business approach, and you mentioned how important it is, and that sounds absolutely clear. How do you get that customer voice? How do you collect their feedback, and how do you know if they're happy? And is it overall a KPI you're tracking?
The first way we know if they're happy or not is whether our sales are stable or go down. And we are in a type of service where, as a consumer, you would buy a 20-liter bottle every 2 to 3 days based on the size of your family. So every 2 to 3 days, if you're not happy, you are totally free not to repurchase. So the stability of our sales is already a testimony to the satisfaction of the consumers. But beyond that, we also monitor that. So what we do basically is what we call consumer, non-consumer survey. We go to a representative sample of households in the communes where we work, and we ask questions about the socioeconomic profiles, the level of satisfaction with the service. And for those who are not consuming our water, we try to understand what they actually drink, how satisfied they are, and why they wouldn't choose our service. We did that in Cambodia in end 2023 at quite a massive scale to ensure that it's representative, even if we have more than 300 kiosks over the country. Based on that, we were able to say that, okay, we have a high level of satisfaction. 85% of consumers are totally satisfied. On average, it's also higher than other services. The one who would drink commercial bottled water, the one who would use household filters, the one who would boil water. Overall, they are happier with our services because of the taste of water. Another thing about consumers' voice, taste, not quality, taste. The quality of service, the affordability. So all these things we looked at, and yes, we try to monitor and identify areas of improvement. As we go to our entrepreneurs every month, if there are things we need to improve, we have the capacity to tell them that, okay, now we are introducing a new standard of operation, a new best practice that you should implement. And we also organize entrepreneur seminars where we gather all the entrepreneurs and animate them as a network. And at that moment, we can also push some messages that, okay, these are the results. This is what we heard from the consumers. So please take that into account. And here are our ideas. What do you think of it? Do you have experience that you want to share? So we try not to interact a lot with the entrepreneurs because they are the ones in touch with the consumers every day, and to get their ideas and their feedback. And what we do also is that sometimes we just go and observe how they work. There is our initial training, but after they do it every day for months, for years. So we just take our maybe 10 best entrepreneurs and our team will just sit with them for a few days and wonder whether there is something special that they do that we could suggest to other entrepreneurs who sell a good amount of water, but maybe not at the same level of performance. So we try to understand and to learn from them because in the end, as they do it every day, they find solutions by themselves.
So there's an element of best practices, but if you monitor the sales, does that also mean that you go into marketing of what you're doing to expand it, or does it market itself?
A bit in between, I would say, because you have a lot of word of mouth. So this is where it markets itself. But for instance, at the beginning, so when we start a kiosk, we do a mix of, say, NGO and business approach. So it's a mix of awareness raising about the importance of safe water for health, a bit of more, say, mainstream marketing. So for instance, our water is branded and it's the same brand across the whole network. So like this, you have like brand values, all the key messages associated to the brand, and it's also about enthusiasm, etc. We do a 1-week recruitment campaign across the villages. So it means not only the village where the kiosk is set up, but also the 5 to 7 ones that are nearby. And we have a sales team as part of the national organization because that's a specific expertise. We keep it also at the national level organization. And they will do door-to-door campaigns, convincing people to test the service for a few days. And like this, saying, okay, let's see if you adopt it. And you have a bit of discounts, like if you are part of the first 200, 400 consumers, maybe you don't have to pay the deposit, you get it for free. It helps basically create the first customer base for the entrepreneurs. And then the entrepreneurs also gain confidence because for them it's new when they start. So it's also about starting to manage the relationship with the community, having this new role. Very often they're a construction worker working in a garment factory, and suddenly they are out there saying that, hey, this water is good for your health, you should pay for it. So there is also a bit of an adoption time for the entrepreneur of their new role. So we help them with this first customer recruitment, then they manage it. And step by step, by themselves, they will push for additional customers. But we feel that this is why there is still a potential, that many entrepreneurs actually tend to manage their customer base. And well, you need water every day, every year for all your life. So it's quite a stable footprint that they have in their community. So what we are trying to push is to encourage them to, for instance, say, okay, maybe that village, you're not serving it yet. Why don't you take one more small delivery vehicle? Why don't you hire one more person in your team and serve this community? Because maybe you are happy, you are earning well, but these people need water. And this is where the NGO things also comes in. It's not about entrepreneurship anymore. It's also about ensuring that each of them never forgets that they might make a living out of it, but the initial purpose is safe water for the community. So whatever people out there still not having safe water, they should reach out to them, they should sell water. And this is where we are still behind entrepreneurs, encouraging them to grow their sales. And yes, it's a mix of NGO and business, but trying to take the best out of the two worlds.
If I continue on my business metaphor, I get why you started out in Cambodia because that's the personal story of the founder or one of the co-founders. What takes you to additional markets like Madagascar or Bangladesh, and you mentioned wanting to open Nepal? Why do you want to expand to other countries when you could triple down on Cambodia? And if you want to expand to other countries, why those?
First, as a 20-year-old organization, there might have been some logic before that are a bit different now, and I'm going to explain you why. I think at the beginning, we really thought that our identity is the water kiosk. Like what we do is only these decentralized production units entrusted to entrepreneurs. So what we were looking for are geographies where we could copy-paste water kiosk. And we were having this idea that, okay, it works in Cambodia, So we're going to do exactly the same in another country and we're going to demonstrate that it works as well. And we started with Madagascar quite early, actually, because we started in 2008. So hardly 3 years after setting up the first kiosk in rural Cambodia. And we tried a lot. But Madagascar, is one of the poorest countries in the world. And rural areas are also having a density much lower than the Cambodian density. And what we found out actually is that it was quite difficult to sustain rural kiosks in Madagascar because the demand for bottled water could have been there, but the capacity to sustain the service, to even just bring the consumables to the kiosk when you see the status of the roads, everything was extremely complex. And actually, back in 2019, our country director said, I have an idea. I think we should serve vulnerable population in urban areas. Our office is in the second city of the country, Tamatave, and there is no access to safe water there. Pipe networks, the coverage is low, the interruptions are multiple. Sometimes you open your tap, water is brown, so it's not even about whether there are bacteria or not, it's brown. Whenever there is a cyclone, it can break down for days, and the socio-economic level is low. As an NGO, it makes sense. So we said, okay, we trust you. How do you want to do it? And he came up with an idea of a hub and spoke model. So basically, in this one, the production is centralized in a facility that is just in the surrounding of the city. And then we are in partnership with the municipality of Tamatave, having selling spokes in different strategic places of the city. So it means where people go every day. And here it's the same concept of you get a filled, so it's a jerry can. You bring your empty one, you take a filled one. And it's working really well. In just 4 years, we've reached 50,000 consumers in a city that has 400,000 inhabitants. So a significant penetration rate already. And we think we can even double this footprint over the years. And operating expenses are already covered by the sales. So for us, it was really a revelation. It's not about the kiosks. It's not about the local entrepreneurs. It's about the service. The common point between all our projects is that we provide bottled water services as a utility. And that's what we do. And it has been a 20-year journey to come to this simple explanation because we really came from a context where producing it locally, delivering it to the last mile was a challenge. So we thought that this was really the key of our success, basically. But this Madagascar experience really challenged us. And we understood that basically this is what matters and this is what we want to replicate. Is it a decentralized kiosk, a mid-scale facility, a bigger one? We don't care. Is it rural areas, urban areas, wherever there are needs, wherever there are people who need it, wherever the service makes sense? And this for us is a recent acknowledgement. And that's why now we want to take a bit of a more strategic approach to our expansion and really think that, okay, there are several contexts where this idea of bottled water as a utility would make sense. So we need to demonstrate that it works in every context where it's relevant. And then what we see, and that's a recent phenomenon and we feel that is growing, is that there are other people out there who have more or less the same idea, but they don't have our 20 years of experience. And we've done that actually for the first time in Bangladesh. We met a local NGO called Utran. They had already established a first bottling facility in southwest Bangladesh, where you have questions of salinity, of cyclones, where the level of access to safe water is extremely low. They identified by themselves that bottled water could be an interesting lever to provide safe water to vulnerable populations. And we met through one of their funders, and we thought that there were obvious synergies. They already have the facility, they know the context, they have team, they have skills. We have experience of how to make it work. Let's work together. And we've been doing that for a year. And it's actually a very interesting way for us to expand our impact is to say that if you want to do it, come to Southern Fontaine. We will share learnings. If we have funds, why not? Not the case yet, but hopefully we'll manage to raise funds to support others to do it. But for us, it's really the future of our work is demonstrating that it makes sense in every context where it's relevant, and then supporting others to replicate it in geographies that they already master. And it doesn't make sense for us to understand every context and go through feasibility studies, etc. If there is already someone who knows all these things by heart and could do it as well as we would do after X years of understanding of the local context.
It's interesting you mentioned because I was working with the World Bank this year and last year for their Aquapreneur Accelerator. Some of the companies which were in that accelerator were having the type of projects you're aiming for. Not exactly the same with slight nuances, but now that you explain how yourself, you have different shades of your concept between Cambodia and Madagascar, those are not that far away. And I think there is always a mutual benefit if they can bring you, as you said, the local context, and you can save them the trial and error phase, which you necessarily have in this kind of project. Sean Free, who was on that podcast, has this rural water network. I guess that's how you connect with them. Are there other platforms, other ways to do those links?
We've tried, being part of many networks. And for sometimes there was also the movement of safe water enterprises. But now that we have this concept really of bottled water as a utility, we feel that it's a network we need to establish. And because what matters is really the operational expertise. So what we want is to do two things. On one side, gathering all the people doing the same job so that we learn from each other, we share, and we all grow as a movement. And we also gain visibility, because if it's 1001 Fontaines alone, we are not as powerful as if we are 10 organizations around the table having the same work, doing the same thing in the field and saying, hey, you need to recognize us. You need to make it an institutionalized approach. You being all the institutions such as the World Bank that you just mentioned. And on the other, obviously, we need to interact with all the other world stakeholders. We feel that the Rural Water Supply Network that you just mentioned is an amazing platform because it's really the right level of discussions with practitioners mastering their expertise and institutions listening to them as well. So it has been for us a very fruitful platform, probably the one we really want to continue investing our energy in the coming years.
You swiftly touched on funding. I feel like that is the main topic we haven't covered yet. I have a deeper question, but let me start with the very straightforward. How do you get funded?
We subsidize the CapEx and the capacity building. So we basically benefit from both private and public funding, mostly private, which means either corporate or family foundations, a bit of individual donors, but mostly these foundations who really have a strategic approach to a sector. I don't know if I can give names, but for instance, we have the Stone Family Foundation has been a 10-year partner of 1001 Fontaines, Vital Foundation, Cartier Philanthropy, Dovetail Foundation. There are plenty of them, and anyone can go on our website and check the names if they want the full list to ensure that I don't miss anyone. We also have public partners. The French Development Agency has been a strategic partner for 1001 Fontaines. We did get an award from USA Development Innovation Ventures Department some years back, and that was an amazing support. So just to acknowledge some work that was done. And yes, for us, we try to look for flexible funding because we have this entrepreneurial approach. We need donors who understand that not everything is written in advance. We have plans, obviously, but over the course of the years, it might change. And when you sign for 3 years, you never know what's going to happen. So we also want donors who understand that we will take decisions based on results. And if we have a problem, if something is not working, we will pivot to make it work. So we want donors who understand the end goal: bottled water, affordable price, sustainable use of plastic, which I didn't mention, but that's also an important part, viability and operating costs. So all these things, if we have donors who are aligned on that, then they will understand that maybe we'll need a bit of change of approach. Also, to give you an idea, is that compared to many WASH models, we are also quite efficient in terms of cost per end consumer. One water kiosk costs approximately $40,000, a Cambodia water kiosk, including everything, like not the building and water treatment, but also all the HR to select the commune, train the entrepreneur, etc. $40,000. And on average, you have at least 2,000 consumers. So the cost is quite easy to calculate, $20 per end consumer. That's efficient. And as it grows over the years, obviously it reduces over the years. So what we want also is to promote this efficiency. And that's how we've been able to secure funding.
But you say if donors are willing to understand that, and that is a big if, because a part of the job, I imagine, is also to train them and to teach them. I'm giving money to something, I want to see it. if they install a pipe, I see the pipe. So go build me a pipe. That way I know my money is in that pipe. So I'm pretty sure I'm being caricatural here, but you might have shades of that discussion ongoing. I do know that companies have their own foundations. And then if they are putting their money in a foundation, they want their foundation to do the stuff, even though you can bring back the argument that you can do it at a much better cost efficiency. And so they rather work through you than trying to build their stuff themselves. But I guess that might be a difficult conversation.
One of the difficult things is more that, as each donor, each foundation, they will have their own criteria. And very often it's about also access to water as a whole. And when you're telling them not only about the infrastructure, but when you're telling them that we will do only 1.5 liter per day per person, not 20 liter, not 50 liter, this is also where the conversation can get hard, that say, no, we want the complete access to water package, and that's not something we can provide. So we need people who understand that we are going to do drinking water. And this is also why we've been more successful in terms of fundraising, I think, with the private foundations. It's because there is also this kind of entrepreneurial approach that can be quite charming for a foundation. When it comes to public funding, this is where we felt that the question of evolving in these gray areas also comes in the funding side, because you talked about the World Bank. We've been having amazing discussions with the Asian Development Bank, who is super interested about our model, but how to make it happen, how to channel their funds to us. This is quite a challenge so far, but that's something we really expect to tackle in the coming years.
I have one important question left, which is for the benefit of the investors, the funds listening to that podcast, and also to all the water professionals who might want to support you in a way or fashion. What are the ways to get involved with you? What are the ways to support your work? Is it just with quotation mark through funding, or are there different ways that they can help you?
There are actually different ways of supporting us. Funding is one of them. So as I said, we're working on this strategic exercise. So we intend to come up with clear funding needs in the coming months. So there will be opportunities to support us financially, to help us grow our footprint and replicate this approach of bottled water as a utility. The other ways to support us are also existing. One of them is, well, if you are yourself a WOLF practitioner, you work in, or an NGO, or an entrepreneur, you work in a given geography and you feel that bottled water makes sense, you can come to us, because it's also supporting us to come with an opportunity to replicate the approach. So opportunity for operational collaboration are highly welcome. And after, what is also, I feel, lacking right now in the sector and for Southern Fontaine today is the policy dialogue. How can we bring this approach, these credentials to the high-level discussions? We discussed the fact that SDGs are coming to an end in 2030. Right now, what we do is definitely not fitting in the definition of safely managed drinking water services the way the SDGs are framed. How can we explain what we do and see if there could be a way to monitor that in the future so that the impact is or has a value for the sector? How can we work with a government tomorrow to make it an institutionalized approach? And this is where today we are not at the right levels of discussion. We are also humble about our results. We have 1.3 million consumers today. It's great. We are proud of it. There are 4 billion people out there not having access to water. So we know there is a gap. So we are humble about where we stand, but we still feel that this approach has a future and could be replicated in multiple geographies. So we want to sit with people who have the possibility to scale it because they make policies, because they channel hundreds of millions of funding every year. If they understand what we do and if they believe it makes sense in multiple places, they can make it happen. Alone, we don't. So there are ways to collaborate with Southern Fontaine to help us basically promote our approach. And this is true for media, it's true for academics, for big institutions who can actually take the decision afterwards.
That means, and to close the loop with my opening question, that you still somewhat believe in the international, intercountry ecosystem to bring in what you're doing in the definition of what's even existing would be something, allowed would be something more, and encouraged and nudged would be the absolute top-notch level. You believe that has chances to happen and that you don't need to be the outsider for 20 more years, having to convince the local authorities one by one that what you're doing makes sense.
The first step is knowing the change you want to see happening and then working towards it. We discovered a few weeks ago that the mayor of Mexico City, Mrs. Clara Brugada, actually started a bottled water service for vulnerable populations. And that's one of the first decisions she took as an elected mayor, is to announce that she will invest more than $1 billion to set up decentralized bottling facilities across Mexico City and distribute these bottles at a super affordable price. It's even cheaper than what we do in rural Cambodia, to give you an idea, to vulnerable populations. And why? Because they acknowledge that pipe networks don't cover all the urban settings, that the end goal is to have pipe networks for every home, safe water for every home through taps. That's great, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. And bottled water is something we can activate today and make available today at the right level of quality, at the right level of price, because the investment is not that much compared to what is required for pipe networks. And I think it's a very interesting example because for us, it shows what it means when bottled water is actually endorsed by local authorities. It's complementary to pipe network. It's not a competition. We all want pipe networks to reach every home. Will it happen? I don't know. But what I know is that in any case, it will take time. Bottling facility can be done tomorrow, starts selling tomorrow. That's what we want to push and why we think it can work.
You're really tempting me to open a new tangent. So I'll slightly skim over it and then I promise you we don't dive too deep into it. But I mean, what happened in Mexico is an example of when you see your churches going down because you're over abstracting water from the subsurface, then you start realizing that, water is a direct impact on the city. When you realize that your wastewater is like a massive problem downstream. I mean, there's a full set of water challenges in Mexico. And what is to be super highlighted in Mexico is exactly what you said, that they took the agnostic approach to just nail it down to what is the most effective, what is the straightest forward, and they came with an approach. And I remember the first time I heard of that story of the bottled water in Mexico is when Paulo Calan was my guest on that podcast for the first time. So it must be 2021 or 2022. And he was appalled by the fact that you're water pro. You've been taught that everything is about pipe networks and that is the alpha and the omega. But making the conscious effort to put that brain aside and to just re-examine just the facts can make huge differences. And before I take you too deep into the rabbit hole, there's more than one solution. And maybe we shouldn't get trapped in what we've been doing for 70 years and hasn't been super effective for 70 years. So that rant over. Do you want to tell me how wrong I am or?
No, and I think what you've said is really true. And another way to say it is also look at what people do. But what I feel is that sometimes we just continue with what we think is right, but people have already changed. And I'll go back to bottled water because that's what I know. Bottled water is one of the 10 fastest growing markets in the world. It's gonna double in the next years. And it's not driven by the top multinational companies that we all know in high-income countries. It's driven by low and middle-income countries, by locally treated water. And probably this phenomenon is even underestimated because the data is not properly collected and you have a lot of uninformal sector. So it's already happening. People already chose not to wait for pipe networks to come. And even when it comes, they don't trust it, so they don't drink it. At some point, it's just about saying, what is happening? What do people want? How can I leverage it? And this is also the bet that we want to take, that demand for bottled water is universal. People want it. People want to pay for it. Why don't we use it to do it in a responsible way with full guarantee of quality, of plastic management, of affordability? But it's already there. So it's a tremendous potential. You just have to build on it. And as a government, do it as a utility. Everybody will get safe water. And invest 90% of money on pipe networks, no issue if that's what you want, but put 10% on bottled water as a utility, it will create an impact.
Okay, now the flip side of that coin, because I have to also look at the two sides of the story, is that Mexico was the first country in the world to invest more on bottled water than invested on utility water. The US is the next in line. By 2027, it is estimated that the US will be spending more on bottled water than they're spending on utility water. When Californians are drinking bottled water at 80%, they get safe tap water today. If they all switch to bottled water for whatever reason it is, and most probably marketing, at some point, there is no money anymore to sustain the networks. And maybe that's the right thing to do when we should let our networks finish to decay. In the US, it's already 700 million that they are behind in terms of investment to just bring them back to normal state. In countries like India, they decided that networks, their role is no longer to bring safe water to people, but to bring water to people. And then it's up to people to invest in point of entry, point of use filters, which again, if that's the way we go, brings new discrepancies between people who can afford the high-end filters and people who cannot afford the high-end filters. So what I'm saying here is that we should think through the model of the future of the beyond the utility model, because if we just let it happen by Jungle's approach, we might not like what's coming out. And there's maybe an interesting in-between where we don't do full pipe system, which were mandatory when you didn't have any ways to digitize your network because your engineer had to be at one specific place and you couldn't have it at 20 places in the city. Nowadays, you can do much different approaches with more distributed systems. I don't want to go in the full of that and to bore you with the full of that. It's just to say that we are carried away by water topics. We are not really driving water topics. We are reactive to that. And maybe it's time at some point to become proactive. But second rant over, I don't want to drag you into that because then really I'm going to bore you out. If that's fine with you, I propose you to round it off with rapid fire questions.
It's time for the rapid fire questions.
What's your definition of innovation in action?
Test, learn, refine, roll out, and then capitalize to ensure that you get it right. Don't think that you got it right from scratch. Test at a small scale, take the learning from that, and then refine your way of working to ensure you create the best impact.
What's the most innovative water solution you've seen in the past 12 months?
The program in Mexico City, for us, it was really like a dream coming true and a bold step from the mayor of Mexico City. So having, an official bottled water service by the Mexico City.
In one word, what's the biggest challenge facing the water sector today?
Quality.
Who is a water innovator you admire and why?
I don't know if you're going to like it or you're going to be disappointed because we already talked about him so much today, but I really like to say that Gary White and the work of water.org is quite impressive. And why? Because what I like about their approach is that they identified one bottleneck, which is how to unlock financing at household level, and they're working on it at scale because they understood that by solving that, you already improve a lot the situation. And I really like this approach of understanding what doesn't work in a system and changing it and focusing on that. And for me, it's really inspiring because at some point, it's not only about making your project, but it's about changing systems. And I think this is what water.org is also successful at, and I'm really impressed by that.
I'm definitely going to like it. I don't know if it was clear, but I'm an absolute fanboy. So what's a single piece of advice you would give to water entrepreneurs?
Listen to the people you want to serve, understand their pain points that you want to address, and ensure that you give them something they want.
And what's one water taboo you think we should break?
What we've been doing for decades is not working and we need to change. I mean, we're in 2025. We probably have 1 in 2 people in the world drinking unsafe water every day. And I think we can't afford to keep on saying we're just going to do the same thing, put more money when there is less money available, where climate change is making everything harder. So I think it's just time to acknowledge that many things the sector has been trying to do are not working sustainably, and that we need to change in a radical way the way we look at access to safe water.
What can and should I do for you?
You're already doing a lot by giving us this opportunity to speak for more than an hour and in such a passionate way about the way we work. Well, I guess helping us connect with relevant stakeholders could be one. I think you do speak with a lot of people in the water sector. And as I said, what we do is not that known and that acknowledged. So whoever wonders how to work on the question of quality, whoever wants innovative approaches, let them know about 1001 Fontaines and put us in touch with them. I think that would be great.
What is the best way to connect with you for people who would like to engage after the different ways you explained that they can collaborate with you?
So we definitely are on LinkedIn, 1001 Fontaines, they can find us. Or my email is am.muret@1001fontaines.com and they can reach out.
You might get spam, but you might also get good stuff. You never know.
Let's focus on the great ones.
Amandine, it was a pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Same
and
here.
I would be super happy to have a follow-up at some point. For instance, when the next UN Water Conference comes out of Earth, or maybe even better, when it's done and that we can rant about how it was wrong. But who knows?
I'll be happy to meet you in person sometime as well.
Thanks for listening to Don't Waste Water. This podcast was brought to you by GF Piping Systems. Loved this episode? Head over to Apple Podcasts to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. See you next time.